You're tuned in to Reimagine 2021, version 11, the #1 virtual crypto and blockchain conference. The recent boom of NFTs has not gone unnoticed, and in this section, our experts talk about why that might be.
So the theme around this conference is around NFTs. So are you following NFTs, and if so,
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, what do you like NFTs, and what fascinates you about them?
Yeah, so I hate to be not uniformly positive on
That's
the theme
great
here, but I think that a lot of what's going on with NFTs is kind of ridiculous right now. And take this with a grain of salt. I'm the guy who didn't like Bitcoin, when that started out, but it just seems like, I don't know, there's, Warren Buffett said, there's this cycle where you have like the innovators, and then you have the imitators, and then you have the idiots. Yeah. And I'm afraid that not all NFT uses, but a lot of them are sort of on the idiot end of the spectrum, because you're paying for what? Some cryptographic hash, which isn't even some artwork. It's some JSON document, and in that JSON document there happens to be another cryptographic hash, which is some artwork, which is now worth millions of dollars, right? And this seems silly for a number of reasons. First of all, I could create another JSON document and just change the order of the fields, or something that looks the same, but that one hasn't been registered, or maybe we'll move on from SHA-256 to Ketchik, from Ketchik to or SHA-3 to SHA-4 someday, and so even these values, and so what are you really getting here? So I think this whole collectibles thing to me feels like a fad, and I'm scared that when it does explode, or when it does explode, it will kind of hurt the whole blockchain space, including people who are trying to do much more reasonable things. That said, I think there are good uses for NFTs. I'm not seeing, that's not the stuff that I'm seeing happening, because it's less kind of cool. And also it's harder to it would require more buy-in from industry. But one place where, or government, one place where I think NFTs could be useful is any place where legally we actually use titles to enforce ownership, right? So for example, think about the title to land or a house, or the title to a car, right? I once sold my car to someone on Craigslist, and it was an extremely stressful thing. And I ended up basically saying we have to conclude the transaction in cash only in a bank branch. So this guy had $7,000 in his backpack, and then we I signed over the title in a bank branch or whatever. And so I could have mugged him for his $7,000 cash, or I don't know, he could have taken the paperwork. So anyway, if we could do an atomic transaction on a blockchain where, hey, you pay me $7,000 and I sign over the title to this car, and the DMV recognizes that, that would be a much improved experience.
How does the NFT apply to that aspect?
Well, the NFT would be the title to the car. So for each VIN, there would be a corresponding NFT. Another place where I think it's not nearly as kind of sexy, but I think digital twins for kind of safety critical parts, right? If you're buying a part for a Boeing aircraft, right? Maybe there's a better price available someplace, but how do you know it's a genuine part, right? And so if you can get that part along with some kind of digital twin, then you know that of course someone could use the real part and give you a fake that has the actual digital twin attached to it, but now that assumes that there's a market for real parts that don't have digital twins, and at most you'll get a factor of 2 or whatever. So it becomes a much less profitable market to create fakes there.
Well, which is great. I think everybody so far has been, on this NFT train, on the collectibles front.
Yeah.
And I've been asking too, in terms of, can NFTs really apply to the physical world, and how would that look like? And you just brought up some excellent examples of a unique identifier, right?
But I don't think that's what people are doing, unfortunately.
No.
And so I hope some of these kinds of what I think of the more serious use cases take off before NFTs turn into a dirty word, because like it's like some giant Ponzi scheme or something that
it's going to set us back again.
Yeah, I mean,
like I see
not necessarily, but I think there's a real danger, so it worries me.
If you actually break down what's happening in the NFT world, the reason why the amount of money exploded so quickly is because the value of the cryptocurrencies that people were holding that were being used to pay for NFTs went up so quickly.
The underlying.
Right. People who were not holding crypto, by and large, with some exceptions, were not buying NFTs. Meaning the traditional art world were not the people buying the NFTs. It was people who were already becoming crypto rich that were putting part of that money into NFTs. So for them, it was a diversification within a crypto portfolio, not a diversification within an art portfolio. There's a big difference. So in that regard, cryptos in the NFT sense have not gone mainstream yet, in my opinion. Now the exceptions would be like applications of NFTs where the technology is very hidden, like the NBA Top Shots. NBA Top Shots is interesting because most people don't even know it's an NFT, or at least they didn't when it first launched. Now maybe they do, right? And Topps is doing something similar with baseball cards. That is very interesting to me because, again, it's not about the technology, it's about the game, it's about the collection, et cetera, et cetera. We're just getting started there in terms of mainstream adoption. DeFi is different, right? The 3 killer apps for smart contracts so far, particularly on Ethereum, have been stablecoins, which gives us the ability to have dollars on a phone that aren't in a bank account, NFTs, right, which is whether it's collectibles or ownership in something, and the third is DeFi, right? What is DeFi? DeFi, or decentralized finance, is effectively the way to take traditional banking services and eliminate all of the central intermediaries involved in providing those services. Getting a loan from a bank. I can actually get a loan from the internet now. Well, how do I get a loan from the internet? What does that even mean, right? But that's what you can do with DeFi, right? I can actually make a bet on the price of a stock, in theory, without a stock exchange, without buying the stock, or without even a CFD provider in Europe or somebody like that, right? What does it mean to make a bet without a central intermediary on the price of a stock, or the price of, or the outcome of a football game, right? So all of these different financial services are now moving to be what we call smart contract based, using this DeFi model, and completely eliminates all these back-end capabilities that banks have built and monopolized over 100 years, which I would posit is a beautiful thing because it opens up competition, it eliminates decisions being made by old white men around a table at night, et cetera, okay? And this is going to basically take over the next 15 years, the entire banking world, in my opinion. Now, a lot of consumers won't even know they're using DeFi because they may use a service like Abra on the front end, but Abra may be making yield for them by generating loans on the back end through DeFi systems, right, that don't have an intermediary. But the consumer just sees that they're making all kinds of interest on their deposits.
What's the ideal world then? Are we going to have options? I'm going to have this option of a decentralized, device or a stack, and then I'm going to have a centralized stack. Or you think they're going to, converge?
Yeah, I have never seen a problem solved better by a government than by the free markets, ever.
Yeah.
Okay, why should it be any different with banking, or money, right, or e-commerce, or commerce in general? And that's where this is headed. Okay, when I want to learn something, I go to the Khan Academy website first, which was not created by a Department of Education in any one town.
Nope.
It was created by some entrepreneurial types who gave it away to the world and figured out a business model to make it sustainable. Okay, I think just like we may not like BitTorrent if you work in the record business, but there's no denying that it's proven very resilient over the years. Money, banking, all the services tied to it, collectibles, are all going to end up working the same way.
Why do you think NFTs, DeFi boomed, NFTs have really went mainstream? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think NFTs just hit differently to retail investors, right? And cryptocurrencies attracted its own kind of set of investors and backers, right? I'm not a collector, you know. I don't have any stamp collections or Beanie Baby collections or anything of that sort, but I look at NFTs and I can admire why people appreciate these things, right? Everyone used to play Pokemon in some form or fashion, and a lot of people talk about NFTs as digital cloud, right? Why do we wear Gucci jackets? Why do we wear Balenciaga shoes? Why do we wear Louboutin heels? It's because they mean something to a certain audience, right? Sometimes the digital flex is all that NFTs are about, right? But that's the current state, right? What if, you know, it's less about flexing in the future and more about value accrual, right? These NFTs in the future can represent devices that are autonomous and intelligent, that have cash flows, right? So by holding this NFT, it's more like a fixed income product where you're also receiving the cash flows that are related to it, right? So when you think about NFTs as fixed income and you think about cryptocurrencies more as equities, you start to understand the relationship of how these type of instruments, these digital instruments, can be applied to different types of financial use cases, right? But for now, you know, we're in the age of the NFT flex. It's amazing to see, you know, people consider their Bored Apes to be part of their identity now, right? Even dressing up like their avatars and not the other way around is really powerful to see. So I think that's the foundation for a lot of what we're talking about here.
If someone owns an NFT on one platform, one network, is it going to be a multi-chain world, interoperability? How do you kind of see me moving if I'm going into DeFi, you know, being able to kind of transfer assets and value across chain?
Yeah, I mean, well, right now you can transfer, you know, normal tokens over from one chain to another, whether that's Polygon, Optimism, or Arbitrum. And I think people expect just to be able to do the same with NFTs. That should be supported, because ultimately I think, you know, Ethereum is very expensive right now. And if you're going to create something that's very interactive, a lot of transactions for a lot of users, you're going to want to do that probably on an L2 where it's cheaper and people can have more interaction. So I think we should sort of make sure that that's compatible. Absolutely.
What do you think is the primary driver for the NFT boom that we've seen this year?
So certainly this year, a lot of it has been art and collectibles, and people kind of waking up to this idea of truly scarce assets, right? Econ 101 tells us if there's a finite supply and rising demand, price will increase. Now there's a reflexive element to that too. George Soros wrote this whole book on reflexivity, and the price rising attracts new entrants who then increase the demand, which increases the price, and it becomes a reflexive process. You throw on top of that leverage, like we just saw this debacle of the guy making the flash loan and buying the CryptoPunk from himself to set a super high price. The nice thing in the digital world, there's so many digital sleuths, they can expose that immediately and say, hey, that's wrong, that's just fraud. So they can kind of disregard that anomalous price in the marketplace. So I think the idea of public recording of that ownership, of the again, provenance or transfer of that asset in the public domain is a huge win for all of us. Transparency gets rid of a lot of the fraud and a lot of the black market things that go on, and I think ultimately makes markets more secure and long-term better.
Going forward, what are your personal metrics for success if NFTs are really going to make it in the world?
Again, really insightful question. So I think obviously total value is one measure of success, right? Just the more assets that become digital and become tokenized. It was really interesting. I went back and I did a hashtag, and I overuse hashtags. Everybody hates my hashtags, but I like my hashtags because they're a filing system, and it helps me go back and see what I said or what I thought in the past. And I did a hashtag in 2018 to tokenize the world. And I went back and I actually saw a video clip of myself on Mornings with Maria in 2018. And she said, you know, you're transitioning from Morgan Creek Capital to Morgan Creek Digital, and how do you see this transition? I said, well, you know, I'm going to spend the next 2 decades tokenizing the world. I was like, wow, I said that like almost 4 years ago. And it was true. I believe that the next 20 years, or now maybe 17 or 16, is really about this transition to everything being tokenized. Every stock, every bond, every currency, every commodity, every piece of art, every case of wine, every collectible car, every private business, every piece of real estate, this building we're sitting in now will ultimately be tokenized, will trade 24/7, fractionally owned. And so each step along the way, whether it's how much property ends up tokenized, how many businesses end up tokenized, how many shares of corporations, although we probably won't have corporations, we'll have DAOs, which we'll talk about later. But as we move the opportunities for ownership over time, one metric to look at is just what percentage of the old world moves into the new world. We've already seen that in the sense of, we started from a science project 12 plus years ago. Literally a science project. And it had been talked about for 20 years, from the Crypto Anarchist Manifesto in 1988. Okay, took 20 years. Because it turns out if you write the Crypto Anarchist Manifesto and you are an anarchist and you live up in the mountains by yourself, you don't really influence many people. And it took Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever he, she, they are, to create an asset that could be ubiquitous and many people could embrace. But in those first few years, from 09 to maybe 15, it was just a science project. And it was mostly ignored by the average person. And so it didn't really have the impact. But then you started to see more ownership. You started to see the number of wallets rise, the number of transactions rise. And so if we think today that we went from nothing, literally zero value, to today close to 3 trillion, and I pause for effect, trillion is a big number. Right? People toss it around like it's nothing. Oh, the ECB printed $5 trillion. No, trillion, 1 trillion is $1 every second for 31,710 years. A trillion is a gigantic number. So to have $3 trillion of value in the crypto ecosystem is amazing. Now, what I think is really cool about that is only 10% of that is the equity of businesses that provide the infrastructure, exchanges, software, tools, things like Coinbase and BlockFi and all these other entities. 90% of the value is in the tokens themselves. And that's amazing. And so as we broaden that base, as we include more assets, as we include more asset types, all of those things are going to be the metrics that we judge the success of the penetration of NFTs, digital property rights, and all the other applications and use cases of digital technology.
And what are some of the roadblocks right now that are holding NFTs back from sort of being mainstream?
In my opinion, I think in general with NFTs and some of the earlier innovations and technologies in crypto space are because of infrastructure. So the more accessibility and infrastructure that's built around these, I feel like it will definitely bring in more user adoption. It'll make it easier to interact with them, store them, use them. And so that'll take some time, as we've seen even generally like with the trading use cases of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. It took a while for it to be widely accessible for the masses. So it took a couple of years, but now it is. And you'll see that there are more people now engaging in the purchase or transactions of cryptocurrencies over the last few years than there were, let's say, in the last 2017 bull market. And accessibility is the number one thing. And accessibility happens by building out the whole infrastructure for it. So in the next few years, we should definitely see more adoption around NFTs, especially in the metaverse, the gaming space, the art and music space. So there's just so many industries that this can transform, and the infrastructure would be, I guess, the one roadblocker that would slow it down. I'd say it wouldn't stop it or prevent it, but it would probably slow it down.
Yeah, definitely. Super interesting to hear that perspective. And I think even talking about things like DeFi, a lot of people use total value locked as one of the metrics. With NFTs, there's a lot of value, I guess, being locked in the NFTs themselves. Do you see similar products being developed or around some of these high value NFT projects?
I mean, we're already seeing some dashboards that are kind of representing these values of NFTs, and so that's starting to happen already, right? So the total value locked is definitely a metric that gets used quite a lot in DeFi, and I've seen some dashboards and platforms that are now doing the same thing for NFTs. So that's just natural. Though that's the way that people are going to value certain protocols and certain projects.
What do you think is the future distribution mechanisms for NFTs or art in general? What is the place for the traditional? Like, what place is the traditional mechanisms going to have in this?
I think that, right now, most commonly, a lot of NFT projects live on Ethereum. I think that Ethereum has a big lead because all the best developers in the space are working on innovating it. And also, there are so many new solutions that are coming up in terms of smart contract capabilities that it's really easy for different projects to learn and grow from each other just because there's so much happening and so many interesting projects that are building on the same space. Having said that, I think that a lot of the layer 2s are really interesting, and also some other layer 0s where people are exploring, different ways to build from scratch and different ways to start communities from scratch. I think, in the short term, we're based on Ethereum. We've been building on ERC 721, and we definitely plan to continue doing so, but we're keeping a close tab on a lot of the other developments that are happening in this space, where we think a lot of amazing people and amazing companies are spending all of their time trying to figure out alternative solutions.